Most people assume visceral fat is simply the result of eating too much and moving too little. That assumption is costing them their health. The real problem is something far more dangerous and far more fixable than anyone has taken the time to explain to you. Visceral fat is not sitting passively inside your body. It is biologically active, around the clock, releasing inflammatory chemicals into your bloodstream, disrupting your hormones, compressing your blood vessels, clouding your thinking, and accelerating the aging of every organ you own. A study published in the journal Obesity found that individuals with high visceral fat had inflammatory markers nearly 3 times higher than those with low visceral fat, even when total body weight was identical. Same number on the scale. Completely different biology, completely different future. And here's what no one is telling you. The standard advice, eat less, move more, misses the single most powerful tool available to you. That tool is specific food, not a diet, not a supplement. Specific, scientifically validated foods that when eaten consistently begin dismantling visceral fat at the cellular level. In the next 15 minutes, I am going to show you exactly which 8 foods the science says you should be eating every single day, why each one works at the biological level most doctors never discuss, and how to combine them for results that go far beyond what any single food can achieve alone. This information could genuinely change the direction of your health. Stay with me. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now with just your age and which you have more of in your daily diet. Processed food or whole food. I want to see who is watching this because what I'm about to share applies very differently depending on where you are starting from. And if you have noticed that your belly seems more stubborn than the rest of your body, that you can be exercising and eating carefully, and that deep abdominal fat simply will not move, add the word stubborn to your comment. That detail matters, and you will understand exactly why in about 3 minutes. Picture a 62-year-old woman who has been careful about her weight for a decade. She exercises 3 times a week. She watches her portions. Her doctor tells her blood work looks fine, yet she cannot lose the fat around her midsection. She has tried cutting calories. She has tried more cardio. The belly stays. What her doctor has not explained is that visceral fat packed deep inside the abdominal cavity around the liver, intestines, and kidneys does not respond the way surface fat does. It is governed by different biological signals. It requires a different approach. Visceral fat accumulation accelerates significantly after 40 and again after 60. The hormonal shifts that accompany aging, the decline in estrogen and testosterone, cause fat to migrate inward toward those deep, dangerous visceral deposits. This is not failure. This is biology. But biology can be guided. Research confirming a relationship between specific foods and visceral fat reduction has been building for years in peer-reviewed journals. Most patients never hear about it. Most physicians never have time to discuss it. And that gap between what the evidence clearly shows and what happens in the average doctor's visit is exactly what we are going to close right now. If you want to understand the why behind the recommendations, what I am about to explain will give you a completely different framework for thinking about food and fat. Most fat, the kind you can pinch, sits just beneath the skin. That is subcutaneous fat. It is cosmetically frustrating but relatively modest in health risk. Visceral fat is a different animal entirely. Researchers at Harvard Medical School have described visceral fat as a metabolically active gland, a structure that continuously secretes inflammatory proteins called cytokines directly into the portal circulation feeding your liver. Think of it as a factory that never closes, producing chemical signals that keep your entire body in a state of low-grade biological alarm. 3 mechanisms explain why visceral fat is so stubborn and so destructive. First, it produces its own inflammatory loop. Visceral fat releases compounds that promote further fat storage and insulin resistance simultaneously. It is self-reinforcing. Second, it suppresses adiponectin, the hormone that regulates metabolism and promotes fat burning. Excess visceral fat actively lowers adiponectin levels, locking the body into a cycle favoring fat accumulation over fat mobilization. Third, gut bacteria are running metabolic programs you cannot feel. An unhealthy microbiome produces compounds called lipopolysaccharides that trigger systemic inflammation and drive deep abdominal fat storage. These are not small differences. They are fundamental biological mechanisms that demand a specific nutritional response. And the 8 foods ahead address them directly. Number 8 is something sitting in almost every kitchen, yet almost nobody uses it to its full biological potential. Extra virgin olive oil. Some of you are thinking, is not olive oil just fat? How does fat help reduce fat? That thinking is exactly what has kept millions of people from one of nature's most powerful metabolic tools. A landmark study published in Diabetes Care followed over 400 participants and found that those who consumed extra virgin olive oil daily showed significantly lower visceral fat accumulation over a 2-year period compared to those using using other dietary fats. Not less overall body weight, specifically less visceral fat. The mechanism comes down to a compound called oleocanthal, which has been shown to inhibit the same inflammatory signaling pathways as ibuprofen, naturally and without the side effects. Visceral fat thrives in an inflammatory environment. Oleocanthal helps cut off that fuel supply. Critical detail, the benefits are tied specifically to cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil, not refined, heat-processed oil stripped of its polyphenols. Use your olive oil after cooking, not during. Heat above 180 degrees Celsius degrades the polyphenols responsible for these effects. Drizzle it over roasted vegetables, salads, or whole grains. Pair it with tomatoes or leafy greens. The fat in olive oil dramatically increases absorption of fat-soluble antioxidants from everything around it. You are amplifying the benefits of the entire meal. Number 7 is green tea, and specifically matcha. Green tea contains a group of antioxidants called catechins, the most potent of which is EGCG, epiallocatekin gallate. A study from Tufts University published in the Journal of Nutrition found that participants who consumed green tea catechins daily for 12 weeks, combined with regular exercise, lost significantly more abdominal fat than those who exercised without the catechins, and specifically more visceral fat. EGCG works through 2 mechanisms. First, it activates thermogenic pathways in fat tissue, increasing the rate at which fat cells burn energy. Second, it inhibits fatty acid synthase, the enzyme responsible for manufacturing new fat molecules. Your body has a factory that produces fat. EGCG slows that production line. Form matters enormously. Matcha, the powdered whole leaf form, contains approximately 100 times more EGCG than standard brewed green tea because you are consuming the entire leaf rather than a water extract. Research from the University of Birmingham showed that combining EGCG with moderate physical activity was significantly more effective at mobilizing visceral fat than either one alone. Drink your matcha 30 to 60 minutes before movement, add a squeeze of lemon. Vitamin C stabilizes catechins and substantially increases their bioavailability. Number 6 is wild-caught fatty fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, herring. These fish contain long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA, at concentrations no plant source can replicate. A meta-analysis published in Obesity Reviews examined 21 clinical trials and concluded that omega-3 intake was specifically associated with reductions in visceral adipose tissue, even in the absence of caloric restriction. People were losing visceral fat without eating less. The mechanism involves adiponectin. Multiple studies have shown that EPA and DHA raise adiponectin levels, helping to break the fat storage cycle and shift the body toward fat metabolism. Beyond adiponectin, EPA and DHA become physically incorporated into cell membranes throughout the body. As we age, membranes become stiffer and less metabolically responsive. When omega-3s integrate into those membranes, they restore fluidity and cellular efficiency. Your cells begin functioning the way younger cells do. Aim for fatty fish 3 times per week. Pair it with dark leafy greens and olive oil. The fat-soluble vitamins in the greens are absorbed far more efficiently in the presence of dietary fat. You are building a synergistic biological package with every meal. Number 5 is the least glamorous item on this list and the most consistently underestimated. Legumes, beans, lentils, chickpeas, black beans. A systematic review published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found consistent significant reductions in abdominal fat, waist circumference, and inflammatory markers in individuals who consume legumes at least 4 times per week. 4 servings per week was enough to produce measurable biological change. Legumes are rich in resistant starch and soluble fiber, indigestible to you, but the preferred fuel of your gut microbiome. When gut bacteria ferment these compounds, they produce short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate. Butyrate nourishes the intestinal lining, reduces gut inflammation, and sends signals directly to fat cells that reduce storage. Researchers at Washington University in St. Louis demonstrated that individuals with lower microbial diversity have significantly higher rates of visceral fat and insulin resistance. Your gut bacteria are not just digesting food. They are sending instructions to your fat tissue. Legumes give those bacteria what they need to send the right instructions. Start with a 1/4 cup per serving if you are new to eating legumes regularly. Initial bloating is normal. Your microbiome is diversifying and it passes within 2 to 3 weeks. Rinse canned legumes are biologically equivalent to home cooked. Add garlic to every legume dish. Garlic contains prebiotic compounds that work synergistically with legume fiber to amplify microbial diversity further. Number 4 is where we move move from the gut to something even more foundational. The mitochondria inside your cells, blueberries along with blackberries, raspberries, and other deeply pigmented berries. These fruits are rich in anthocyanins, the compounds giving them their deep blue, purple, and red colors. Research from the University of Michigan demonstrated that diets enriched with blueberry anthocyanins produce significant reductions in visceral fat and improved insulin sensitivity. Researchers found that anthocyanins directly altered gene expression in fat cells, turning down genes responsible for fat storage while activating those responsible for fat metabolism. This is nutrigenomics, food communicating directly with your DNA. The mitochondria connection is what demands attention. As we age, mitochondria accumulate damage, lose efficiency, and decrease in number. This is a primary biological driver of metabolic slowdown. Blueberry anthocyanins have been shown to reduce oxidative stress inside mitochondria and stimulate the creation of new mitochondria, a process called mitochondrial biogenesis. More functional mitochondria means more cellular energy and less fat storage. Frozen blueberries are not inferior to fresh. Research suggests the freezing process ruptures cell walls, making anthocyanins more bioavailable. Pair them with a small amount of full-fat yogurt or kefir. The fat aids absorption of fat-soluble compounds, and the probiotics amplify the gut microbiome benefits already building from your legumes. Number 3 is walnuts. A study published in Diabetes, Obesity, and Metabolism followed nearly 200 overweight adults and found that those consuming approximately 43 grams of walnuts daily showed significant reductions in visceral fat over 16 weeks compared to a control group consuming equivalent calories from refined carbohydrates. Same calories, profoundly different biological outcomes. Walnuts are the only tree nut containing meaningful amounts of plant-based omega-3 ALA. But the more remarkable story involves elagitannins. Walnuts are exceptionally rich in these compounds, which gut bacteria convert into a molecule called urolithin A. Urolithin A activates a cellular process called mitophagy, the mechanism that clears damaged protein debris from inside mitochondria. Research from the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne demonstrated that urolithin A improved muscle function and metabolic efficiency in aging subjects by restoring mitochondrial health. When mitochondria work efficiently, metabolic rate rises and capacity to burn visceral fat increases. Note that the conversion of elagitannins to urolithin A requires specific gut bacterial strains, which people eating diverse fiber-rich diets, including the legumes and berries already discussed, tend to have. These foods are building a biological system together, not functioning in isolation. Eat your walnuts in the evening. They contain melatonin and serotonin precursors that support sleep quality. Research from the University of Chicago demonstrated that sleep-deprived individuals lost significantly less visceral fat, even under identical dietary conditions, to well-rested individuals. Sleep is not a luxury detail for visceral fat reduction. It is a core mechanism. Number 2 is the most underestimated category on this entire list. Fermented foods, kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, miso. A study published in the journal Cell, conducted by researchers at Stanford University, found that participants consuming a diet high in fermented foods for 10 weeks showed dramatically increased microbial diversity, significantly reduced inflammatory markers, and measurable changes in gut composition compared to those on a high-fiber diet alone. The fermented food group outperformed the high-fiber group on inflammatory reduction. Here is why this matters specifically for visceral fat. When gut microbiome composition is disrupted, a state scientists call dysbiosis, bacteria produce compounds called lipopolysaccharides that leak into the bloodstream, trigger systemic inflammation, and drive visceral fat storage. A self-reinforcing cycle. Fermented foods introduce live beneficial bacteria directly into this environment and produce organic acids that shift the gut pH toward conditions where beneficial communities can reestablish themselves. Think of it as restoring the ecological balance of a disrupted forest. A study published in the Journal of Medicinal Food found that participants consuming fermented kimchi compared to fresh cabbage showed significant reductions in body fat percentage, waist circumference, and fasting blood glucose. The fermentation process itself creates bioactive compounds with measurable anti-obesity effects, absent in the raw vegetable. Consume your fermented food at the beginning of a meal before the main course. Research suggests this creates a more favorable gut environment for digestion and modulates the blood sugar response of everything that follows. Number 1, garlic and its close relatives, onions and leeks. Garlic contains a compound called allicin, which forms when raw garlic is crushed and an enzyme called alliinase contacts the precursor compound alleine. Beyond allicin, garlic contains a portfolio of organosulfur compounds, diallyl disulfide, S-allyl cysteine, choline, ajoine, each studied for effects on fat metabolism, insulin sensitivity, and inflammation. A study published in the Journal of Nutrition tracked over 1,000 adults and found that regular garlic consumers had significantly lower visceral fat mass, measured by CT scan, the clinical gold standard for visceral fat quantification, independent of total caloric intake and exercise habits. Here's the mechanism that places garlic at number 1. Garlic's organosulfur compounds have been shown to directly inhibit the differentiation of preadipocytes, cells on the verge of becoming fat cells, into mature adipocytes. Garlic intervenes at the precise biological moment a cell decides to become a fat cell and interrupts that decision. A study from the University of South Carolina demonstrated that O gene, one of garlic's compounds, induced apoptosis in mature fat cells, causing existing visceral fat cells to die. Not shrink, die. The direct reduction of the fat cell population. Now, here's the preparation detail that almost no one knows, and it changes everything. If you apply heat to garlic immediately after cutting it, the enzyme allinase is deactivated before it can produce allicin. The fix is simple. Crush or chop your garlic, then let it rest 10 to 15 minutes before adding heat. In those minutes, allinase produces allicin, which is substantially more heat stable than the enzyme itself. This one change dramatically increases the biological potency of every garlic-containing meal you make. Combine garlic with extra virgin olive oil and legumes or leafy greens. Mediterranean populations have eaten this way for generations and consistently show among the lowest rates of visceral fat accumulation and metabolic dysfunction in documented research. That is not coincidence. That is biology guided by food. Before the action steps, I need you to hear something important. If you are watching this in your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, it is not too late. People in their late 60s have reversed visceral fat accumulation building for 20 years. People in their 70s have restored metabolic function their physicians told them was permanent. Biology is not destiny. Biology is malleable. Every day you eat with intention, you are shifting your biological trajectory. The independence you want, the energy to keep up with grandchildren, the mental clarity to stay sharp. It is available through daily choices, through exactly what we have been discussing. What I ask of you is not perfection. Start with 2 or 3 of these foods this week. Build from there. Here is what you now understand that most people never walk away from a health video with. Visceral fat is a biologically active structure secreting inflammatory signals that accelerate disease and aging throughout your body. And it responds specifically to specific foods. Extra virgin olive oil cuts the inflammatory environment visceral fat depends on. Green tea and matcha activate thermogenic pathways and slow fat cell manufacturing. Wild-caught fatty fish restores cell membrane flexibility and adiponectin signaling. Legumes feed the gut microbiome and generate butyrate that communicates directly with fat cells. Blueberries protect and restore mitochondrial function, the cellular engine of metabolism. Walnuts deliver L-glutanins converted by your gut into urolithin A, which cleans mitochondrial machinery as you sleep. Fermented foods rebuild the gut ecosystem that regulates the inflammation driving visceral fat. And garlic, eaten daily and prepared correctly, intervenes directly in the creation and survival of visceral fat cells themselves. These are not 8 separate strategies. They are one system addressing visceral fat from 8 biological angles simultaneously. Every time you combine 2 or 3 of these foods in a single meal, you are not adding benefits. You are multiplying them. Start tonight with one practical change. Crush 2 cloves of garlic and let them rest while you prepare dinner. Drizzle cold-pressed olive oil over your vegetables after cooking. Add a handful of beans to whatever you are already making. 3 actions. 0 additional cost. Measurable biological shift beginning tonight. Drop a comment right now saying "Aware" if this gave you something real today, if it changed how you are going to think about your next meal. Now think of one specific person in your life, a parent, a sibling, a close friend, someone who has been fighting stubborn belly fat and has never heard any of this. Send them this video right now, not later. Right now, that single action may be more valuable to them than anything else you do today. Subscribe to this channel. The mission here is straightforward: to give you honest, research-grounded guidance on how to live longer, stronger, and healthier. The kind of information most people only encounter after something has already gone wrong. You deserve to know it before that happens. In the next video, we are going to discuss the specific breakfast habits research consistently links to visceral fat accumulation after age 50, and the 3 morning changes that begin reversing that process within 2 weeks. You will not want to miss it. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Nutritional management of body composition must be individualized based on your complete medical history, current health status, and all relevant factors. Never adjust or discontinue any medication without first consulting your healthcare provider. The information presented presented reflects current published research and should not replace a thorough evaluation by a qualified medical professional.